In 1927, a West Virginia coal miner carried his whole day's food in a 3-decker metal bucket. Water on the bottom, beans in the middle, cornbread on top. He ate it in total darkness, with hands he could not wash. Number 16 on this list was invented because miners could not stop working long enough to eat. And number 2, journalists in 1931 refused to believe it was real. Hit that subscribe button and let us count down the 25 brutal meals coal miners actually ate 2,000 feet beneath America. Number 25, water from the bottom of the bucket. Start with a thing nobody thinks of as food, because underground, it absolutely was. The miner's dinner bucket had a sealed bottom compartment that held about 2 quarts of water. And by 10 in the morning, that water was warm as bath water and tasted like tin. It did not matter. A man loading coal by hand in a room 4 feet high sweated out more water than a farmhand in August, and that bucket bottom was the only clean liquid within 2,000 feet. Miners drank it in careful rations, a few swallows at a time, because running out at noon meant 6 more hours of dry-mouthed shoveling in coal dust. Fathers taught sons the rationing schedule before they taught them how to set a timber. The water was warm, flat, and metallic. It was also the most valuable thing in the bucket. Every miner knew it. Number 24, lard sandwiches. 2 slices of white bread, a thick smear of lard, a shake of salt. Close it up. That was lunch for thousands of miners across Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Kentucky, especially in the last few days before payday when the meat was gone and the beans were low. Lard cost about 8 cents a pound in the 1920s, and 1 pound made a week of sandwiches. Here is what people miss. This was not a meal of ignorance. It was a meal of arithmetic. A man loading 10 tons of coal by hand burned somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 calories a day, and lard was the cheapest concentrated fuel money could buy. Pure fat, no spoilage, no refrigeration needed, and it did not crush flat when the bucket got knocked around in the man trip. Some wives sprinkled sugar instead of salt for the men with a sweet tooth. Miners ate them in the dark and did not complain because the man beside them was eating the same thing. Number 23, cold biscuits with fatback. The miner's wife was up at 4 in the morning, and the first thing on the stove was biscuits. Flour, lard, buttermilk, baked in a wood stove before the sun touched the mountain. She split them while they were hot and slid in a piece of fried fatback, the cheap, salty slab of cured pork fat that hung in every coal camp smokehouse. By noon, those biscuits were stone cold, and the fat had gone firm and white. He ate them anyway, and here is the strange part. Cold, the fatback turned almost silky, and the biscuit soaked up the salt and grease until every bite tasted cured. Fatback ran about 10 cents a pound at the company store. 4 biscuits with fatback delivered close to 1,000 calories, and they held together in a bucket that got dropped, kicked, and sat on. Appalachian miners ate this exact lunch for 60 years. Nobody wrote it down because everybody already knew it. Number 22, the onion sandwich. This one sounds like a punishment. It was actually strategy. A thick slice of raw onion between 2 pieces of bread, sometimes with a swipe of lard or mustard, salted hard. Onions cost almost nothing, kept for months in a cellar, and never spoiled in the heat of the mine. But the miners believed something more. Generations of coal camp wisdom held that raw onions cleaned the blood and cut the coal dust, that a man who ate onions every day coughed less. The science was not there, but the vitamin C was, and in camps where fresh fruit appeared maybe once a month, an onion sandwich was quietly doing work that nobody understood. The smell filled the whole section when a man unwrapped one. Nobody minded. Underground, where everything smelled like powder smoke and damp rock, a raw onion smelled like something alive. Old miners interviewed in the 1970s still ate them every day. Habit, they said. Then they lived to be 90. Number 21. Sardines and crackers. Payday lunch. When the script cleared and there were a few coins left over, a miner stopped at the company store and bought a tin of sardines for a nickel and a handful of saltine crackers from the barrel. This was the closest thing to a restaurant meal a coal camp offered. He carried the tin in his pocket, peeled it open at dinner time by the light of his carbide lamp, and ate the little fish off the blade of his pocket knife, stacking them on crackers, drinking the oil straight from the tin when the fish were gone. Nothing was wasted. That oil was calories, and calories were the whole point. Sardines were one of the only foods underground that gave a man real protein without a wife, a stove, or a plan. Single miners and boarders survived on them. Sardines, crackers, and a plug of tobacco. That was the bachelor miner's entire supply line, and it worked. Number 20. Potted meat and Vienna sausages. By the 1930s, the company's store shelf had a new section, and miners cleaned it out every week. Potted meat, a spreadable paste of pork scraps and seasoning, cost about 6 cents a can. Vienna sausages, soft little links packed in brine, sold for 10 cents. Neither one needed ice. Neither one spoiled in a hot mine. Neither one cared if the bucket sat next to a coal seam for 5 hours. Miners spread potted meat on light bread with a knife they also used to cut blasting fuse, and nobody thought twice about it. Food scientists would later point out that these cans were engineered for exactly this customer: maximum salt, maximum fat, maximum shelf life, minimum cost. The companies knew who was buying. In the coal fields of Alabama and eastern Kentucky, a Vienna sausage sandwich with mustard was a standard dinner whole meal. Their grandchildren buy them ironically. The miners were not being ironic. Number 19. The cold fried egg sandwich. Eggs were coal camp currency. Almost every family kept a few hens, which meant almost every dinner bucket had this in it. The wife fried an egg hard in bacon grease before dawn. Hard because a runny yolk would soak through the bread and turn the whole lunch to paste by noon. Then slid it between 2 slices of bread with salt and black pepper. 6 hours later, cold, the egg had gone dense, and the grease had set into the bread, and the whole thing ate like something between a sandwich and a pastry. Miners loved them. An egg cost the family nothing but chicken feed, delivered 6 grams of protein, and survived the bucket without complaint. On good weeks, there were 2 eggs. On the weeks before a strike vote, there was 1 egg and more bread. Wives sent messages this way without saying a word. A man could read the state of his household finances by opening his bucket lid. First pattern break. Here is what the movies never show you about eating underground. Miners ate in total darkness or by the small flame of a carbide lamp, sitting on rock with hands stained black to the wrist. There was no washing. Coal dust went into every bite. And they did not eat alone. Every mine had rats, thousands of them, and miners fed them on purpose. They tossed crusts and bacon rinds into the dark and watched them disappear. This was not kindness. It was insurance. Rats could sense a roof fall or a pocket of bad air before any human could. And when the rats ran, the miners ran. An old saying in the coal fields put it plainly: when the rats leave, you leave. So a miner sacrificed a corner of his lunch every single day to the animals that might save his life. Think about that the next time you complain about your lunch break. Number 18. Pinto. Beans in a mason jar. This was the workhorse. The wife cooked a pot of pinto beans on Sunday, seasoned with a piece of salt pork, and every morning she ladled a pint of them, broth and all, into a mason jar and screwed the lid down tight. Into the middle deck of the bucket it went. By dinner time, the beans were cold and the broth had thickened to almost a jelly, and the miner ate them straight from the jar with a spoon he kept in his pocket. Dried pintos cost 8 cents a pound, and a pound fed a family for 2 days. Cold soup beans delivered protein, iron, and fiber in a package that could survive being dropped down a slope. Some men traded beans for sardines, beans for pie, beans for a better spot in the man trip. The jar came home empty, got washed, and went back down the next morning. Same jar, sometimes for years. Miners' children kept those jars after their fathers died. They knew what they were. Number 17, cornbread and buttermilk in a jar. Now here is one that stops people cold. Crumbled cornbread packed into a jar, buttermilk poured over the top, lid screwed on. That is the whole recipe. By noon, deep in the mine, the cornbread had soaked into the tangy milk and turned into something between porridge and pudding. Cool, sour, filling, and eaten with a spoon in the dark. Across the southern coalfields, this was not unusual. It was beloved. Cornbread and milk was already supper in half the houses of Appalachia, and the jar just took it underground. Buttermilk was practically free, the byproduct of churning butter, and it stayed safe far longer than sweet milk because the acidity held bacteria off. The miners did not know the microbiology. They knew it never made them sick, and they knew it settled a stomach full of coal dust better than anything else in the bucket. Old miners in Harlan County were still eating cornbread and buttermilk for supper in their 80s, out of the same kind of jar. Number 16, the pepperoni roll. This might be the only food on this list with a birth certificate. In 1927, an Italian immigrant and former coal miner named Giuseppe Argiro started baking bread rolls with sticks of pepperoni pushed into the center at his bakery in Fairmont, West Virginia. He had worked the mines. He knew the problem. Miners needed a meal with no wrapper, no utensils, no refrigeration, and no assembly, something a man could eat with one filthy hand while the other held his lamp. The pepperoni roll answered every requirement. As the bread baked, the fat in the pepperoni rendered out and soaked into the crumb, seasoning the roll from the inside and sealing it against going stale. It kept for days. It cost a few cents. It survived the bucket. Within a decade, every bakery in the northern West Virginia coalfields was making them, and Italian mining families baked them by the dozen at home. Today, it is the unofficial state food of West Virginia. It was invented for men who ate in the dark. Number 15, the Cornish pasty. When Cornish miners crossed the ocean in the 1800s, they brought the greatest piece of underground food engineering ever designed. A pasty was a dense pastry pocket filled with beef, potato, onion, and rutabaga, crimped shut along one edge with a thick rope of dough. That crimp was not decoration. It was a handle. A miner held the pasty by the crimped edge, ate everything else, and threw the handle away because his hands carried coal dust, powder residue, and worse, and the crimp took the contamination for him. In Cornish tradition, the discarded crust also fed the Tommyknockers, the spirits believed to live in the mines and knock warnings before a collapse. Practical and superstitious at the same time, which describes mining perfectly. A good pasty stayed warm for hours wrapped in cloth, and a cold one was still a complete meal, meat, starch, and vegetable in one sealed package. Cornish, Welsh, and English miners carried them into the coal fields of Pennsylvania and Illinois, and their American neighbors copied them within a generation. Number 14, halushki. The Slavic miners of Pennsylvania, the Poles, Slovaks, Hungarians, and Ukrainians who filled the anthracite fields brought a dish that cost pennies and stuck to a man's ribs like mortar. Halushki, cabbage sliced thin and fried slow in butter or lard until it went sweet and brown, then tossed with soft egg noodles or little dumplings and enough black pepper to make it interesting. A head of cabbage cost a nickel and fed a family of 8. Packed cold into a jar or a covered pail, it went down the shaft the next morning, and cold halushki dense with fat and softened cabbage, ate better than it had any right to. In the patch towns around Scranton and Wilkes-Barre, the smell of frying cabbage on a Sunday meant the same thing in every language. Church halls in the anthracite region still sell halushki by the quart at fundraisers, made by the granddaughters of miners, from recipes that were never written down because they were never forgotten. Number 13. Cold pierogi. Same coal fields, same families, different masterpiece. Pierogi were half-moon dumplings of cheap flour dough stuffed with mashed potato and a little cheese or sauerkraut boiled by the 100 on Saturdays, then fried in butter. The genius for a miner was what happened on Monday. Cold, a fried pierogi became a self-contained ration, a sealed pouch of starch and fat that no amount of bucket abuse could destroy. A man ate them like biscuits, 3 or 4 at dinner, one saved in his pocket for the long afternoon. The filling was potatoes, which the family grew, wrapped in flour, which cost 30 cents for 10 pounds. Feeding a mining family on pierogi was not tradition first. It was survival first, and it became tradition because it worked. Mining widows later fed their families on pierogi sales to neighbors, and some of those kitchens still exist as businesses today, built on flour, potatoes, and grief. Second pattern break. Now let us talk about the math that shaped every single meal on this list, because it is uglier than you think. Most coal camps paid in scrip, metal tokens, or paper good only at the company store, where prices ran 20 to 50% higher than stores in town. The company owned the house, the store, the church, and the scale that weighed the coal. And a miner was paid by the ton, but only for coal, with a rock docked out at the company's discretion. Tennessee Ernie Ford sang that he owed his soul to the company store, and miners did not hear a metaphor. They heard payroll. These were not just poor men's meals. They were the meals of men who were being charged premium prices for flour and fatback by the same company that set their wages. Every jar of beans was a small act of financial resistance. The garden, the hog, and the chicken coop behind a miner's house were the only economy the company did not own. Number 12. Souse meat sandwiches. When a coal camp family killed a hog in November, nothing walked away. The head, the feet, and the ears were boiled down until the meat fell apart, then packed into a pan with the cooking liquid, seasoned with vinegar, salt, and red pepper, and left to set overnight. The natural gelatin from the bones firmed it into a sliceable loaf. Souse, head cheese. Every culture in the coal fields had a name for it. Sliced thick and laid on bread with mustard, souse made a dinner bucket sandwich that was cheap, high in protein, and thanks to the vinegar, resistant to spoiling in the warm air of the mine. The tang cut through coal dust like nothing else. City people found souse horrifying then and find it horrifying now. Miners found it delicious, and butchers in the coal fields sold every pan they made. A pound of souse cost about 15 cents. A pound of ham cost 3 times that. The choice made itself. Number 11. Water gravy. Some mornings there was no milk, there was no meat, there was flour, there was a spoon of grease saved in the can on the stove, and there was water. So the miner's wife made water gravy. Grease heated in the skillet, flour browned in it, water stirred in until it thickened, salt and pepper thrown in with a heavy hand. Poured over biscuits, it filled the plate and it filled the stomach, and it sent a man underground with something warm inside him, even if that something was mostly hope. Water gravy shows up in oral histories from every coal field in America, always in the same sentence as the bad weeks, the strike weeks, the winter. The mine worked 2 days out of 6. Nutritionally, it was almost nothing. Psychologically, it was everything, because a hot breakfast meant the household was still functioning. Children raised on water gravy grew up and refused to speak of it, or grew up and craved it. There was no in between. Number 10. Shuck beans. Here is Appalachian food preservation at its most stubborn. In late summer, mining families strung fresh green beans on threads with a needle, whole pods, and hung them from the porch rafters to dry for weeks until they went leathery and pale. The mountain name was leather britches. Come January, the dried beans were soaked overnight and then simmered for hours with a piece of salt pork, and they came back to life as something entirely new, chewy, smoky, concentrated, tasting more like the pork than the pork did. A single summer garden, strung and dried, carried a family clear through the winter with no canning jars, no ice, and no store. Miners carried shuck beans in the jar just like pintos, and old-timers argued about which was better with real heat. Food historians now study leather britches as a preservation technique. Coal camp wives were not preserving heritage. They were preserving beans, because the alternative was buying vegetables at company prices in February. The heritage happened by accident. Number 9. Killed lettuce and ramps. Every spring, something wild happened in the coal camps. The ramps came up. Ramps are wild leeks that grow on Appalachian hillsides, with a flavor like garlic and onion, had an argument, and miners' families dug them by the sack. In the kitchen, tender lettuce and ramps went into a bowl, and then smoking hot bacon grease was poured straight over the top, wilting the greens instantly. Killed lettuce. After a winter of dried beans, salt pork, and cornbread, this was the first fresh thing anyone had eaten in 5 months, and mountain people believed ramps thinned the blood and cured winter sickness. They were not entirely wrong. Ramps are loaded with vitamins A and C, arriving exactly when coal camp bodies had run empty of both. One warning: eat enough ramps and you sweat them for days. Teachers in coal camp schools sent children home over the smell every April. Whole towns in West Virginia still hold ramp festivals every spring. The hunger is gone. The craving stayed. Number 8. Fried potatoes and cornbread. This was supper, the meal waiting at the top of the shaft. A cast iron skillet of sliced potatoes fried slow in bacon grease with onions until the edges crisped and the middles went creamy, and a second skillet of cornbread. And that was the whole table. No meat, not a side dish in sight, because this was not a side dish. For a mining family of 8, fried potatoes and cornbread appeared 3, 4, 5 nights a week, and the miner shoveled it in by lamplight with hands still gray at the knuckles, no matter how hard he scrubbed. 50 pounds of potatoes cost under $1. Cornmeal came in 25-pound sacks. The grease was saved from breakfast. Total cost of feeding 8 people, maybe 15 cents. Miners' children interviewed decades later almost never remembered this meal as poverty. They remembered the sound of the skillet and their father home safe, eating. Sometimes the meaning of food has nothing to do with the food. Number 7. Soup beans. If Appalachian coal country had a national dish, this is it, and there is no second place. Pinto beans, soaked overnight, simmered all day with a ham hock or a chunk of salt pork until the broth turned thick and brown and the beans went creamy, served in a bowl with chopped raw onion on top and cornbread on the side for crumbling in. In the coal fields of eastern Kentucky, southern West Virginia, and southwest Virginia, soup beans were supper more nights than not for the better part of a century. A pound of pintos, 8 cents. A ham hock, 15 cents. That pot fed a family for 2 days and delivered more iron and protein per penny than anything else in America. Miners ate them for supper, carried them cold in the jar for dinner, and ate them again the next night without complaint, because complaint required an alternative. Restaurants in Kentucky now serve soup beans and cornbread as heritage cuisine. The heritage is hunger, managed brilliantly. Number 6. Molasses on everything. Sweetness in a coal camp came from one place, the sorghum barrel. Sorghum molasses, pressed and boiled down from cane at community stir-offs every fall, cost about 50 cents a gallon and lasted a family all winter. It went over hot biscuits with butter, over cornbread, into coffee, and in the dinner bucket, it soaked into a folded biscuit that arrived at noon as a dense, sticky, caramel dark package that miners ate like candy. Because it was candy, it was the only candy. A molasses biscuit was quick energy in the exact hours when a man's morning fuel ran out, sugar and iron in one dark spoonful, and coal camp mothers gave it to pale children on doctor's advice. The stir-off itself was one of the few celebrations the camp calendar allowed. Children chewing the sweet foam skimmed off the boiling pan, while the men took a night off from being tired. Molasses was not an ingredient in the coal fields. It was an event. Number 5. Apple stack cake. Here is the most beautiful thing anybody ever put in a dinner bucket. The apple stack cake was the mountain wedding cake, born of poverty and cooperation. Because no single family could afford a rich cake, each neighbor baked one thin, firm layer of spiced dough, sweetened with molasses, and the layers were stacked at the gathering with cooked dried apples spread between them, sometimes 6, 8, 10 layers tall. The cake was not eaten fresh. It sat for 2 or 3 days while the moisture from the apple filling migrated into the dry layers, transforming the whole tower into something soft, dense, and deeply spiced. You could count a family's friends by counting the layers. A wedge of stack cake wrapped in waxed paper was the crown jewel of a miner's bucket, traded for, guarded, and eaten last, in the dark slowly. Dried apples cost nearly nothing. Flour and molasses were pantry staples. The only expensive ingredient was community, and the coal fields, whatever else they lacked, were rich in that. Third pattern break. Before we hit the top 4, understand what these meals were up against. A hand loader in the 1920s moved 8 to 10 tons of coal a day with a shovel. In a seam sometimes so low, he worked on his knees, breathing dust that was slowly stiffening his lungs into what the miners called black lung, decades before any doctor would write it on a death certificate. The work burned 5,000 calories or more, and every meal on this list was reverse engineered from that number. Fat and starch were not weaknesses of the coal camp diet. They were the entire point of it, and the danger reshaped even the eating itself. Miners ate fast, in shifts, listening, a change in the drip of water, a new creak in the timbers, silence where the rats had been. Dinner in a coal mine was never just dinner. It was 20 minutes of fuel taken on inside a machine that was always quietly trying to close. Number 4. RC, cola, and a moon pie. By the 1930s, a new dinner appeared at Mine Mouths and Company stores across the South, and it cost exactly 1 dime. A moon pie, the big marshmallow sandwich of graham cookies dipped in chocolate, born at the Chattanooga Bakery in 1917. After a salesman asked Kentucky coal miners what they wanted, and a miner framed the size with his hands against the rising moon, and an RC Cola, the tallest, cheapest soda on the shelf. 5 cents each. The pair became so famous it turned into a song. The working man's lunch of the whole South. Nutritionists will tell you it is sugar stacked on sugar, and they are right. And that is exactly why it worked. A man in his 10th hour underground did not need a balanced meal. He needed 700 fast calories and a jolt of caffeine, wrapped in cellophane, immune to heat, dirt, and time. The moon pie was designed to a coal miner's spec, and it outlived the mines that ordered it. It is still on the shelf. Ask it who it was made for. Number 3. Coffee soup. When the cupboard hit bottom, coal camp families reached for a meal that most Americans have never heard of. Coffee soup. Stale bread torn into a bowl, hot, coffee poured over it, sweetened with a spoon of sugar or molasses, whitened with canned milk if the can was not empty, eaten with a spoon, like cereal. For children in the coal fields, this was breakfast on the bad weeks, and for miners, it was sometimes supper on the worst ones. The coffee was usually stretched too, brewed weak or cut with chicory, or made from grounds used twice. It sounds like despair in a bowl, but listen to the people who ate it. Oral histories describe coffee soup with tenderness, the warmth of it, the sweetness. The fact that a mother could put something hot in front of 5 children when the bucket of flour was down to dust. Hunger has a memory, and strangely, it is not always bitter. Sometimes it tastes like coffee and bread and somebody trying. Number 2, bulldog gravy and water sandwiches. This is the entry reporters refuse to believe. In 1931, during the brutal strikes in Harlan County, Kentucky, journalists and investigators came to the coal fields and asked blacklisted mining families what they were living on. The answer, sung into history by Union balladeer Aunt Molly Jackson, was bulldog gravy, flour, water, and a little grease boiled into a gray paste and poured over anything or nothing. And beans, when there were beans. And for the children, water sandwiches, bread moistened with water, and a smear of lard so it would swallow easier. That is the whole recipe. Bread, water, lard. Committees investigating conditions in the Kentucky coal fields recorded testimony of children fainting in school, and relief workers found families who had eaten bulldog gravy for weeks. This was not the frontier. This was America, in the age of radio and automobiles, in counties sitting on top of some of the richest coal on earth. The men who mined that coal watched their children eat water sandwiches. Remember that the next time somebody tells you the miners struck over nothing. Number 1, beans and cornbread forever. The number 1 meal coal miners actually ate is the one they ate more than all the others combined. At supper, in the jar, cold, hot, reheated, and re-reheated, from their first day in the mines to their last day above ground. Beans and cornbread. It was the floor the entire coal field diet stood on. When the mine worked steady, there was ham in the beans and butter on the cornbread. When the mine slowed, the ham became fatback. When the strike came, the fatback became grease, and the beans got thinner, and the cornbread got smaller. But the meal survived, because it was designed to shrink without disappearing. A pot of beans was the coal camp's savings account, its insurance policy, and its Sunday dinner all at once, costing a dime and feeding a family for 2 days at 2,000 calories a bowl, with cornbread crumbled in. Retired miners with pensions and full refrigerators went right on eating beans and cornbread every week until they died. Their children asked why. The answer was simple. It never once let them down. Nothing else in the coal fields could say that. Here is my challenge. Make one of these this week. The soup beans, the fried potatoes and cornbread, the pepperoni rolls. Eat it, and remember it once fueled a man through 10 tons of coal. Then drop a comment and tell me which one you picked. I want to know if the pepperoni roll beats the cornbread and buttermilk. And if your family ever worked the mines, ask what was in your grandfather's bucket. Because these were not just meals. They were the fuel that lit every light in America, eaten in the dark by the men nobody saw.